Hi everyone, in this video we are going to build this website. It has three sections. We have the navbar, we have the search area, and we also have a login area. In the navbar, when I take cursor over any of these items, you see that the background changes, so it has this hover effect. And also here in the search area, we can search anything over here in the search bar and it takes us to Google's homepage. For instance, when I type here banana and hit enter, you see it takes me to google.com. And also under the categories, we have these various categories over here. When I take cursor over any of these items, you see that the background changes. So this site is working very fine. And we also have a login section here where you can enter your details, either submit, or you can enter your details and also reset. So this page is working, and we are going to build this page using HTML and CSS in a few minutes. So let's get started. Here on my desktop, I have this folder called Web Project. And inside this Web Project folder, I have an images folder with one image for the background and also one image for the search icon. I also have index.html file and style.css. So I'll open this Web Project folder with my code editor, which is Visual Studio Code. Now in the VS Code, I have the images folder, the index.html and style.css here. If you're wondering or if you don't know how to set up this, I recommend you check out my beginners tutorials to Visual Studio Code, which teaches you how to set up Visual Studio Code with some settings and shortcuts that will help you. Now let's head over to the index.html file and create the HTML boilerplate. So type exclamation and hit tab. You can change the title to whatever you want to call it. After the title, let's link the index.html to the style.css. So type link. In the href, type the name of the CSS file. In the body tag, we want to create a div with the class container. Let's style this container div in the CSS. Here in the CSS, I have this basic styling for the entire document to make styling in the CSS very easy. So now let's style the container. Since it's a class, we select with the dot notation. So now let's style the container itself. Width of 100%. Height 100 VH. The background image, we first give it a linear gradient with this color with a comma spaced again. And after the color, let's add some image with a comma, so URL. Type the image file path. Now we want the image to fit the browser window and not repeat, so let's add the following styling. Background size to cover. Now let's run this and see what we have. You can see we have a fresh web page with a background image. So now let's continue in the HTML. Now in this container, create a div with the class navbar. In the navbar, create a UL. In the UL, create an LI. In the LI, create an anchor tag. Set the href to hashtag since it's not going anywhere. So copy this and paste 4 more times for home, about, contacts, products, and services. Let's start the navbar in the CSS. So select the navbar. Width 100%. Background is RGBA color. Padding 7 pixels on 10%. display flex, align item center, justify content, flex end. Now let's style the UL. Width 60%, display flex, align item center, justify content, space between. Now let's start the LI. Navbar. Let's start none. Display block. Padding 5 pixels, 10 pixels. Border radius 4 pixels. Now let's start the anchor tag inside of it. Text decoration to none. We increase the font size to 1.2 rem. The color black. Font weight 600. Now let's run this and see what we have so far. So we have this, but as you can see now there is no hover effect, so let's add that in the CSS. So select navbar, colon hover, we want the background color to be orange. Now when we save this, now you see that when I take cursor over all these items, the background changes, so our code is working. So let's continue with the HTML. When you look at the finished version of what we're building, you see that after the navbar, we have two more sections, one at the search side and one for the login. So what we'll do is that we'll create a giant div and divide it into two. So we'll create two smaller divs in it, one for the left and one for the right. So let's go to the HTML. So here in the HTML, after the closing navbar div, let's create a div with the class page container. And in this page container, we'll have two sections. So let's create another div with the class left container. After the left container, let's create a right container. In the left container, create an h3 header tag with a text search. After that, create a form. So the action is https www.google.com/search and the method is get. In the form tag, create one input field. The type is text and the placeholder is search keyword. After the input, let's create a button with the class myBTN. Set the type to submit. Now inside this button, create an image tag, img, hit tab. The src should be the search image, the search icon. And you can remove the alt tag, it's not required. Now let's run this and see what we have so far. Now you can see the H3 here because of the background, so let's give the CSS styling. Now let's style the page container. Width is 100%. Display flex. Justify content space between. Padding 10 pixels and 20 pixels. Now let's start the left container. Background color is transparent. Padding is 50 pixels. Height is 80 viewport height. Display flex. Align items center. Flex direction is colon. Flex basis is 40%. What the 40% flex basis does is that it takes the left container takes 40% of the page container, the width of the page container. Yeah, that's it. Now let's start the H3 so that we can actually see it. Text align should be center. We'll change the font size to 5 rem. Font weight 600. We'll give it a color of white. Give the margin border of 50 pixels. Now after the H3, let's style the input. Width 300 pixels. Height 40 pixels. Background color, this RGBA color code. A color of black. Outline none. Border none. Border radius 5 pixels. Border bottom right radius should be 0. Now you can copy this and paste again. And change the bottom to top. And it's also 0. The font size 1.3 rem. Padding 2 pixels. Let's save this and see what we have. So we have this. Now let's start the button. So here, select the button. There's the class we give to it. The width should be 40 pixels. Height should also be 40 pixels. Border none. Outline none. Background color. This RGBA color code. Position absolute. Margin right 3 pixels. Now over here, go to the top here and copy these border radiuses. And let's paste it over here. Now change the 0 to 3 for the two of them. And be sure to add the pixels. Now let's start the image in the button, the search icon. Let's give it a weight of 35 pixels. So now let's run this and see what we have. We have this, so you can see that everything is aligned perfectly. So now let's add the category section of the HTML. Here in the HTML, after the form tag, create an h5 header tag with the text categories. After that, create one div with the class search categories. In the search categories div, let's create one more div. Now in this div, the text is popular. So copy this div and paste 3 more times for latest, price and size. Now let's style this in the CSS. Let's select the h5 header tag. The left container. Give it a white color. The font size is 2 rem. Font width of 600. Margin top is 10 pixels. Now let's start the search category divs. With a margin top of 20 pixels. Background color should be transparent. Display should be flex. Margin left 35 pixels. Now let's start the 4 divs inside the search categories div. Give it a width of 80 pixels. Padding 10 pixels. Background color, this RGBA color we've used recently. Color black. Font size 1.3 rem. Border 1 pixel solid black. Margin 10 pixels. Text align center. Cursor pointer. What this cursor pointer does is that when we hover over the items, the cursor changes into a pointer, something like a hand. Yeah. So now let's run this to see what we have. Anyway, this is looking good now. But you see, when I take cursor over it, there's no hover effect as at now. So let's implement that in the CSS. So copy the class and paste. Colon hover. We want when we hover, the background should change. Background color should change to red. Now when we save this, now we have this, and you can see this looking very nice. And when I take cursor over this items, you see that the background changes. So this is working. Now let's continue with the HTML. So here in the HTML, after the closing categories div tag, create an h5 tag with the class service header and the text is service. So after this, create a div with the class service. In this div, create an h5. The text is web development. So after this, create a paragraph tag, and in this generate some lorem text like 23. Hit tab, and we have this. So now let's style this in the CSS. So here we select the service header class, the left container, text align center, change the font size to 2 rem, font weight to 900, color is white, margin bottom is 10 pixels. Now let's start the service class. Width is 100%, padding is 5 pixels. Now let's start the h5 header tag inside the service div. Font size 2 rem, font weight is 900, color orange, margin bottom is 10 pixels. Text align should be center. Let's run this and see what we have so far. This is looking good so far, but you see we can see the paragraph tag over here. This is because the background is very dark and the text of the paragraph is also dark, so it blends in and we can see. So now let's give it a styling in the CSS. So now let's style the paragraph. Margin left 50 pixels. Font size 1.3 rem. Color, we use this RGBA color. Font style oblique. Border 3 pixels orange double. Padding 10 pixels. Border radius 10 pixels. So let's save this and see what we have. So now we have this, and this is looking very good, and we are basically done with the left container. So let's move to the login section in the right container. In the right container, create an h3 header tag. The text is login. After that, create a form with a class login form. The action is not required, so we can remove it. In the login form, create an input field. The type is text, a placeholder, enter first name. Copy the input field and paste 3 more times for last name, email, and password. Here for the third and fourth input fields, I change the input type to email and password respectively. This tells the computer what type of input to expect from the user for every given input field. So after the input, we create an anchor tag. The href is hashtag since it's not going anywhere. The text is forget password. So after the A tag, let's create 2 buttons, one for reset and one for submit. Let's run this and see what we have so far. We have this as you can see over here. So let's start this in the CSS now. Now let's start the right container. Display of flex. Align item center. Justify content center. Flex direction column. Now let's start the login form. Margin top 50 pixels. Padding 50 pixels, 10 pixels. Border radius 20 pixels. Display flex. Align item center. Justify contents. Flex start. Flex direction column. This RGBA color code. With a comma. The same color code. Now let's change the 3 here to negative and this one to negative. But be sure that you don't touch the 4 since that's the blur effect. Let's run this and see what we have. Now we have this. But we can see the login text as we see the search over here, and it seems the login form has been pushed to the edge too much than we want. So let's take care of this in the CSS. Now in the CSS, let's go to the right container. Let's add flex basis. Flex basis of 60%. Now let's save this and see what changes. Now you can see that the form has been pushed to the center, but we still can't see the H3 header tag very well. So let's start this in the CSS. Now over here, let's select the H3. Increase the font size to 5 rem. Font weight 600. Color white. Now let's style the input. Width 250 pixels. Height 30 pixels. Margin 5 pixels. Margin 2 pixels solid black. Border right, none. Now let's save this and see what we have so far. Now we have this and this is looking very fine. So let's start the placeholder, the A tag and also the buttons, then we are done. Now let's select the placeholder. Double colon. Font size 1.2 rem. Font family Ubuntu Mono. Padding 10 pixels. Now let's style the anchor tag. Text decoration none. Font size 1.2 rem. Color black. Let's save this and see what we have. Now you can see that the placeholder is looking nice and the forget password is also looking nice. So we are left with the buttons. Let's style them. So select the buttons. Width to 50 pixels. Height 40 pixels. Margin 5 pixels. Border none. Outline none. Border radius 20 pixels. Font size 1.2 rem. Background color, this RGB color code. Color white. Font style oblique. So let's save this and see what we have. So we have this. But look, if I type anything into the input field, there is nothing showing that this is a password. Under normal circumstances, it should just appear as stars. And if I submit this, it did submit. The email does not include an @ sign, which should be a warning we receive. So it means something is wrong with my code and probably in the input type. So let's check that in the HTML. So over here, as you can see, the input type for email, I didn't spell it well. I didn't bring the L. And also the password, I spelled it in my own way, which is very crazy. So I misspelled password. Now if you run this, you're back here, and if I type anything, now you can see that this is a password, and if I try submitting, it says that it must include an @. So now the issue has been fixed. So folks, this is basically how we build this site using HTML and CSS. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. If you have any question, let us know in the comment section below. We'd love to hear from you. As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.